Okay, let's bring in Francesco Rizzuto now. He joins us live from Manchester. He's a professor of European law at the University of East London. Welcome to you, Francesco. And while we're chatting, I think we're going to show some pictures of early voting. Of course, the election not till Sunday, but some people can't always make it on the day of the election. So some people have been voting earlier today already. But in terms of who they're voting for, as we heard in that report, doesn't sound like there is much of a credible opposition. The leader of the opposition from the last election in 2020 is in exile. So is there anybody credible to vote for?
No. The short answer is no. Even the opposition candidates are asking to support Lukashenko. So this isn't a real election. It's really an attempted effort at a plebiscite, and probably a warning to the Belarusian population that if you don't support me, you may end up going the way of the Ukraine.
Well, this was exactly the point I wanted to make, and I think it's a fear that has been expressed by members of the public when they've been interviewed, that, you know, we've seen the worst case scenario, that what happens if you move closer to Europe. So is it a genuine concern?
I think it's a concern. Look, we've seen in other parts of Eastern Europe where there was a certain nostalgia for the certainties of the past, and why should Belarus be any different, especially given what's happened on its borders? Look, this isn't a real election. Let's be clear about that. He's either got rid of everybody inside internal opposition, they're exiled or in prison. It's just not real. What is real is what's going to happen to Belarus, given the 1996 and 1997 treaties of union with Russia, once Lukashenko disappears to Moscow, presumably, when he does disappear. Will there finally be this union? Because remember, Russia is essentially using Belarus as its own territory for defense and other purposes. So that's the real game, I think, even though it appears not to be in the election.
If we look back at what happened in 2020, it looked like for a moment there, maybe Lukashenko was going to lose. People were out in the streets in large numbers. The opposition were claiming that it was a fraudulent election. And then it seemed like the government came down heavy. And a lot of people have been imprisoned just for going out on the streets in protest. Was that the last chance to overthrow Lukashenko?
Sadly, I think so. I think he lost that election by all accounts. But I think since then, what we've seen is a movement from an authoritarian, fairly nasty little state to a totalitarian state. I think that any opposition to a union with Russia will be controlled precisely because of what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years. So and actually people outside of Belarus are saying, please don't protest after the results of the so-called elections are announced tomorrow, because this will give Lukashenko and his people, who are all being sanctioned, of course, by the rest of the world, certainly the rest of Europe and the United States, don't give them an excuse, because perhaps the real game will be played later, once the Ukraine situation is sorted, and Putin will want his pound of flesh elsewhere as well for security purposes.
Francesco, great to speak to you. My guest, Francesco Rizzuto, is a professor of European law at the University of East London. Thanks so much.
Thank you.